Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whenever the fuck you're watching this. This is the Rosinbaggers podcast brought to you by Backyard Sports. We are back and we are previewing the upcoming MLB season. Talking about AL East tonight. I got both boys with me. Big Stove, how you doing, bud?
Doing good, bud. Doing good. Pitchers and catchers reported the other day, and I know I know someone in here is more excited than I am about that. Uh, but it is a great feeling, and just pretty much a month and a half away from some real baseball games. So cannot wait,
Sir.
bud.
Yes, sir. It's exciting. Ty, how you feeling?
Oh, as soon as that music drops, man, I was feeling effing fantastic. I am so excited to get ready to roll, talk baseball again with the boys on the pod. Like Stove mentioned, pitchers and catchers reporting. Honestly, it's a second holiday for me next to opening day of MLB reporting. Just knowing that spring is right around the corner, knowing that the baseball is forthcoming. I'll be honest with you, I was anxiously looking forward to the baseball season, probably a little bit more than usual this year, just based on, I'll be honest, the last 2 weeks of the NFL season were miserable with the AFC Championship and Super Bowl. I was so horribly disappointed and could not have come at a better time, really, in the sports limbo world. Bring on baseball, baby. I'm ready.
Ty,
Yeah.
I'm actually kind of surprised you were excited about baseball because your team's going to suck this year because they don't have Molina or Pujols.
The team's going to be great this year because we got that guy that used to be in Cubby Blue, who, by the way, just tweeted out today that he absolutely adores everything about being in a Cardinal uniform. Apparently, no love lost about his time in Chicago. He's ready to be a Cardinal, baby. Cubs and Cardinals is going to be fun with Wilson Contreras when he comes to bat. I will be extremely curious to see reaction when he's back in Wrigley.
Yeah, yeah.
How Cubbies fans gonna receive him?
They're gonna love him. It's not the fans. It's not the fans. It's the front office and the fucking Ricketts family. I will say that right
That's
now.
fair. That's fair.
That Cubs fans will open Wilson, welcome Wilson with open arms and applaud him as they should. Because that guy left everything out there day in and day out. He was a hustler. He is one of those guys that you want on your team. He will go to bat for you. He will go to battle with you. He will be one of those guys in the trenches. And Ty, you said it. Cardinals got a good one in Wilson, and it'll be interesting to see. And we can talk, more about this matchup as we preview the NL Central. But a little preview for that, it will be interesting to see how he fills the shoes of Yachty and the legacy that Yachty left. Now you have Wilson Contreras, who wanted to have that legacy with the Chicago Cubs.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
A little more intrigue with the matchup this year.
I can't wait till the NL Central pod. I am so stoked for the NL Central pod. And we fast forward to 4 weeks from now.
Yeah, right.
I am jazzed about it, man.
All right, well, let's jump into a little bit of kind of administrative stuff from Major League Baseball this offseason before we start talking about the AL East. And let's talk rule changes. So let's go around clockwise. All right. So let's talk about bigger bases. Right. And as you can see, I think they went to 18 and a half instead of 16 or something along those lines. But it's a couple inches bigger in terms of the surface area of the base. And MLB proposed this as an idea for player safety, but also to help contribute with more stolen bases. Now, I don't know how many bases you guys, when you played, attempted to steal. I did quite a bit because I was just aggressive on the base paths. And I don't know that 2 inches on the base would have made a difference for me as a base stealer. Like, I don't think about, oh, now I got 4 inches less between the 90 feet of the base path, right? Like, that's negligible to me. I don't know how MLB framed it that way. Now, the safety aspect, I can get down with that a little bit, and the fact that the diamond's a little more kind of perfectly shaped with the size of the base, whatever. The safety thing I can get down with, though, right? Because maybe if we can avoid some collisions, if you've got a little more room to get one way or the other on the bases, but again, like a couple inches is kind of negligible. Ty, I want to start with you. What are your thoughts on the base change? Is there really anything to this?
Out of all of the rule changes and out of everything that is going to be implemented in what will be the 2023 version of Major League Baseball, which will look vastly different from the 2022 and beyond version of Major League Baseball, this is the one that I'm just like, meh. It doesn't really affect me one way whatsoever. Now, I can imagine, with that 2 extra inches, your bang, 50-50 plays, your opportunities where, how many times during stolen base attempts to this year, and I can count a handful of just games that I watched where we had to go to review on a bang play at second base because somebody thought they were safe and they were tagged out or vice versa. I think that extra 2 inches on either side of the base might be able to aid some of those stolen bases. I think we are going to see a spike in the stolen base numbers. I would, if I'm Ricky Henderson, I'm a little bit pissed off. I still don't think that number gets close to being touched just based on the talent and skill of the defensive players in today's day and age and the velocity that ball gets to the catcher's mitt in the first place. However, I do think we'll see it. We'll see a spike in stolen bases, but to me, it's not going to be a significant spike that would dramatically alter the course of what would be a normal baseball game. This one's, like I said, this is a meh for me. I'm totally okay with it, and you can put it in the guise of player safety, and I'll be on board.
So, question back
not
at
a
you.
5 bad.
For sure. Question back at you on that. So, the spike in stolen bases, do you think it's going to be a spike in success rate, or do you think we're going to see a spike in volume because we're going to see more attempts and thus see more successes, but at a similar rate? Because that was my thing is like, I don't know as a base stealer, right? If I had played, major league level and they had made the change when I played, I don't know that I would have thought in my head that I'm going to be more successful. But maybe like you put it, right? Those bang plays, I might have a little more of a shot at. I've got a little more of a hook slide surface area as well, right? So do you think it's going to be a spike in success rate?
Yeah, I'm for the spike in success rate, and I'm for the spike in success rate based on that second point that you made. Yeah. I think that there's a lot of times where we see players hesitant to take those stolen base opportunities, and now this is going to give them an added little incentive. And how many times are you going to be successful on a stolen base opportunity? How many times is that throw going to come maybe an inch wide to the left or an inch wide to the right that gets you in for a stolen base? I think the incentive is there for the green light. I think the guys like John Birdie are already going to have that green light and are going to probably put up 30 plus. But there will be an added incentive to see it from a league-wide jump based on the fact that more people are going to be more aggressive on that base path.
Nice. Stove, what are your thoughts on the bases?
I agree. It's going to be aggressive. It will increase the number of attempts and number of success rates. If you look at the overall scheme of things in a scientific matter here, you're increasing the base size on both ends of the spectrum. First base, second base, third base, okay? Overall, you're increasing, you're decreasing the distance between point A, point B by just the bases alone. So, for example, okay?
We're off to a great one. We are off to an incredible fucking start.
This is amazing. This is
MLB.
This is episode 1 of the 2023 season.
Right here is first base, okay? Now, this is normal first base, okay? There. So, now, as a base runner, instead of here,
I'm getting a bigger lead off.
I'm one step closer to point B, and the base over at point B is already
the dog sneaking up behind you. He's going to pick you off.
In all reality here, folks, okay? I'm getting my pre-steps here. The flash.
Lightning
flash here equals more stolen bases. Numbers shoot through the roof. It's just going to be like the home run ball era, boys. That's all it's going to be. And then they're going to dumb down the bases, so then they're going to shrink the bases.
So one, Stove, I like that point you made, right, about the leadoff portion. I guess I didn't, that was one thing I didn't really put 2 and 2 together. Now I can get another 6 inches, right? Because the base is 2 inches closer. I can dive in. I can get another 6 inches. I'm already cutting another half foot off. But the other point is something we're going to talk about. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead and finish.
But the other point, too, that I was going to make is something we're going to talk about in a moment is eliminating the shift. Are we going to have more base runners on base with more opportunities, with more incentive to try to steal? We're going to see a lot more singles this year, I think, in the shift, right, without the shift, as opposed to what we've seen in the past with guys rolling over to the second baseman who's standing where the right fielder usually plays. But go ahead, Stowe, finish up your thought there.
So my last point to this is look at the number of stolen base attempts last year and the unsuccessful rates of those attempts. And if you look at the video replay, how many of those are within a step or within inches? You just gained 2 inches just on the bases alone. And then you take another step in your leadoff. I mean, essentially, if you're looking at the numbers part of it as from point A to point B, and because you're always looking at how you can decrease the distance from point A to point B, essentially you've shaved off probably an extra, I'd say 6 to 8 inches with just the bases alone and then your extra step.
Yep. For sure.
Listen, the MLB Network has diamond demos. I would like to personally advocate that we make
I think that's a
Stove's
segment
Kitchen.
now.
Stove's Kitchen is going to be a part of the podcast moving forward.
Absolutely.
I think so, boys.
We're pushing for that. We're getting a demo every single week. You're going to get some. You're going to get some
so you guys
fundamentals. You're going to get some hitting fundamentals.
I'm getting a batting cage in the garage back here. We're going to have another point of view. We're going to have batters on you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Fundies with Stovey.
Fundies in the kitchen. Here we go. Love it.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff and great points.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think, Dad, that's part of it, right? They want excitement. They want movement on the base paths, and scoring is something that's going to move the needle. I think they want to get more eyes on the game. So I think this is partially that. I think it is partially safety. Guys have a little more surface area to get to when they get to the base as well. But I think a lot of these rules are all about scoring, but also all about moving the game along. And speaking of moving the game along, the pitching clock. So this was experimented on in minor league baseball, and they saw anywhere from like an 8% to like a 15 to 20% at times difference in the speed of the game. And I think there's other factors, like the pitch clock isn't the only factor in that mathematical equation that they probably used to figure out those numbers. But at any rate, they saw on average a decent decrease in the amount of time spent during a minor league baseball game with the pitch clock. Now they're talking about, only so many throwover attempts, and in fielders pitching as well. They're trying to kind of do away with some of that craziness that goes on in the games to try to speed the game up, move the game along, get these teams to, put more fans in the seats, put more eyes on the TV screen. Stove, how do you feel about the pitching clock?
Honestly, I get what they're trying to do, but I don't really think it's the pitching problem, the time between pitches and everything else like that. I don't think that's the issue here. And so for this one, this one's null and void for me. Get rid of this one. Now it brings me to, counterpoint, because Gary, you and I were both pitchers. We both said that we like to get the ball and, go, especially if we're in a routine and everything else like that. I get it, but for this, honestly, I honestly don't think. I think it shaved off maybe 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes of game time last year with the pitch clock rules that they implemented. Honestly, I mean, it wasn't that big of a change for me that I could tell, on the games I watched. But so for this one, for me, null and void. Like, I could care less about this one. They could get rid of it.
Yeah. You mentioned the whole, I wanted to get the ball, I wanted to get on the rubber, and I wanted to pitch. And transparently, I gave up a lot of stolen bases because I just didn't give a fuck. When there were runners on, I was trying to get the batter out. I wanted to get on the rubber, I wanted to pitch, yada yada. So for me, that for those reasons as well, like this one's really just this one is the one I care the least about in the grand scheme. But I also think that this could also contribute a little bit to what we just talked about a moment ago. Pitchers are going to be a little more cautious about throwing over. They're going to be a little more cautious about when they step off and how they manage the pitch clock. And it might introduce a little more of that aggression on the base paths as well, especially if a guy does throw over twice, right? Because now you've got absolutely no reason to even worry about him trying to throw over. He's either going to balk or you're going to get the base anyway because he's pitched over, thrown over too many times. So this one for me was the one I was the most I don't care about. I just don't want it to impact the game. So that's what I'm going to be paying attention for this season in terms of how much it impacts the major league game. Because the minor leagues, they handle things differently at the minor league level as well, in game and stuff. So I don't know how much you can gauge that in terms of how much impact we're going to see at the major league level. So that's the big thing I'll be paying attention to with the pitch clock. Ty, what are your thoughts on the pitch clock?
To me, the pitch clock there's a little sense of excitement for me, and it's a lot less about the pitchers getting the ball and delivering it to the mound. To me, I'm excited about the fucking hitters finally have to get in the goddamn box and get ready to go.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you there.
100%. And I have never. You keep talking about how these pitchers stall out, and everyone is. When they're analyzing this and making comments on social media about the rule changes and saying how the pitchers really need to hurry up and deliver the ball, they're sitting there waiting for the batter to get his ass in the box. Like you said, you guys get in the groove and you're throwing strikes and you're humming, and then the batter keeps stalling out and calling time every 2 seconds. That's where the game stalls. That's where these at-bats take 25 minutes. Get in the box, and get ready to go. You foul one off, step back in the box, get ready to go. I'm actually excited about the pitch clock rule, and I wish they wouldn't call it the pitch clock rule. I wish they would call it the hurry up and get your ass in the batter's box rule. Because that to me is really where the emphasis lies on this. And I think honestly, we're going to see, if it's enforced, I think we'll see more strikes called because of batters outside the box and not being ready to get back in.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, right? We have been kind of focusing on the fact that Major League Baseball called this the pitch clock rule. But, I mean, you look at a guy like Nomar Garciaparra, right, who was notorious for just calling timeout, fixing his glove 100 fucking times, yada, yada, yada. Not all pitchers are A.J. Burnett, right? He used to be very, very deliberate on the mound, take his time, shake off a lot of pitches. Yeah, so you're still going, and you're probably not even close to how long it took him. But, yeah, for sure, get your ass in the box, and let's do this thing. So I think that's a really, really good point, Ty, that this is more of a two-faceted thing than it really has been pitched, for lack of a better term, as. All right. So MLB has announced that they're going to continue. This is not a new rule. They're going to continue the ghost runner rule at second base. We talked a little bit about it last year in the preseason leading up to the year. Stove, I can see you don't like it clearly. I'll go to you first. Tell me how you really feel.
You don't want to know how I really feel because I'll break something. I'll break something here.
Just don't break the kitchen. We need that for future episodes.
We need that for more demos.
This is one of the most stupidest rules that Manfred and Company has came up with in his existence as MLB commissioner. And this is probably one of the most fireable offenses that there is. This stupid, just stupid. Why do it in regular season and not do it in postseason? Why? Or why not just play a few extra innings and then after, say, the 10th or the 11th or 12th inning, if you're still going, then go ahead and put a runner on second or something. But right off the bat, like, and then just not to have it in play in postseason, like, no. We are all in agreement on this one. I know for a fact we are. So Manfred should just be fired on this rule,
this principle alone.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. And I heard today somebody made the equivalence to hockey, right? With the shootout during the regular season and then the different overtime rule in the postseason. However, as you just mentioned, Stove, hockey plays an entire period of overtime before they go to shootout. Now they've got it 3-on-3 now, and it's really exciting. They've done a really good job with managing that overtime. But I'd also like to see a study done on how many innings this saved. Because in my just mild recollection, I didn't do any research because I didn't need to because of how I feel about this rule. But in my mild recollection, I don't remember often games going 14, 15, 20 innings. There's like a handful a season, right? So I would be curious if there was a study out there, if there's any literature about it. Like I said, I wasn't going to waste my time to look at it anyway because it's a dumb rule to begin with. But how many innings did we actually save last year with this rule vice the old rule? That'd be one thing I'd be really curious about. Ty, what are your thoughts here? Any did last season change your mind at all about the ghosty rule?
No, not at all. And really, if you want to go back into last year's podcast and just copy and paste them into this pod, it remains the same. Again, what I don't like about it from the management perspective, from the game perspective, is you're getting to a lineup and you go to the bottom of the ninth and you're still tied, and the 3-hitter would have been the next up to bat to go into the 10th inning, and now he's just standing automatically at second base where he's got some pop in the bat and maybe could have taken one out of the park, giving you a game-winning home run. Well, then your game's over. But now he's sitting at second base, and you get to the bottom of the order, and 3 groundouts later, and we're still playing 13, 14. And you know what? Even with the extra innings rule, even with the ghost runner, which is something that we did when we didn't have enough kids to play baseball in the backyard, and that's where that rule should effing stay. Even watching extra inning baseball last year, I didn't see that much of a dramatic increase or decrease in the length of time. We were still watching games that were going 14 and 15 innings. And in the other thing, and again, what we talked about last year, nobody's played it right. Nobody has played the ghost runner rule to the way it should be designed. If I'm managing, it is a bunt and sack fly basically practice. It is a bunt sack fly. You get your runner over to third, and then you sack fly him home. And hardly anybody played by that concept, which is just baffling to me. This ghost runner rule could go by the wayside. It's one of a couple that we're going to be diving into here in the very near future. This is one I'm fired up about. This is one that did not, even as it was there last year, didn't sway me from my hard stance, that this is a hard no.
And Ty, you mentioned the sack bunt, and I want to say the Atlanta Braves, even in the postseason, had not attempted a sack bunt all year long.
Yeah, crazy.
Insane,
crazy. All right, let's get to the last rule we want to talk about here. And Major League Baseball has officially eliminated the shift. And as you can see in this picture, this is a pretty drastic representation of the shift. But this is what some teams were doing against certain hitters. This was the Astros, and they had all but one player, defensive player, really, over on the right-hand side of the diamond. No longer allowed this year. And there are very strict stipulations in terms of boundaries that players can move to and within in terms of infielders where they can be aligned. And I'm going to say right off the bat, I have a lot of concerns about that, because eliminating the shift is one thing, but telling players that they can't move into like specific double play depth or take away that deep single with a guy who hits a lot of bloops, maybe one way or the other, that to me is a bigger impact of this than just eliminating the shift. And I don't like that aspect of it. If you want to say that you can only have a certain number of infielders on one half of the diamond, fine. But you're not going to tell me that I can't have my second baseman shade up the middle a little closer to the bag because I know of a hitter's tendency to go up the middle, or I know that a hitter has a tendency with the shortstop. I'm going to play my guy a little more in the 5-hole, that sort of thing. Like, that's a problem for me with this rule. And that's the one that I dislike the most about this specific rule, despite the fact that I've been very vocal. I hate this rule to begin with. Hit the fucking ball, go the other fucking way. You're not going to tell me that velocity makes that much of a goddamn difference. Hitters are better than they ever been, just like pitchers are better than they ever been. It's analytics. It's the all or nothing bullshit results that everybody wants from these fucking at bats that has ruined the game and introduced the shift. Hit them the fuck out of it. David Ortiz used to lay down bunts. You're not going to tell me these motherfuckers today can't fucking do it. Stove, talk to me about the shift, man.
I mean, your last part right there, like, took the words out of my mouth. Like, seriously. Like, these guys are professional hitters, professional ball players. They can learn to hit oppo. Like, it's a defensive strategy. If a guy cannot hit oppo and is pulling the ball constantly, then yeah, absolutely. Shift. Why wouldn't you? But to take out that defensive strategy, it's gamemanship. It's gamemanship.
Yep. Ty, talk to me, bud.
I'm coaching defense. I'm going to put my defense wherever the fuck I want to put my defense at. Pure and simple. That diamond is what that diamond is. Stove already talked about the mathematics of that diamond and talking about how big and how wide and where you can go. I'm going to put my defense anywhere on that field where I think that ball is going to drop if that's going to win me a fucking game, period. Now, here's the thing, and this is why I don't think that this banning the shift has a long-term viable shelf life for Major League Baseball, because of what Major League Baseball is ultimately trying to accomplish with its pace of play rules.
Yep.
And you go back to your little mathematics, 100%. Big Stove. You Dr. Stove got up there, talked about the X's and O's and throwing A's with some numbers, little algebra, calculus, whatever. Listen, this is going to result in more base hits. This is going to result in batting averages going up. This is going to result with more runners on base and more stolen bases and longer innings because pitchers can't get out of a jam because a lefty can hit the ball wherever the hell a lefty wants to hit the ball to. Joey Gallo and Matt Carpenter's careers revived. Good for you. You can't hit the ball. You're a Major League Baseball player that can't go oppo, and that's embarrassing, and that you shouldn't be in the majors because of that. My ultimate thing is, if pace of play is what this particular upcoming generation wants to see in baseball, if that's what the kids want, a faster, quicker game, then this will go by the wayside because these innings are going to drag on because they're not getting the outs.
Yep.
They're not getting double play balls. I think, honestly, if we look at it and we take a look, I will be very curious to see game times compared to last year and this year. I think they'll be about equal.
Yeah, we might get a little more in terms of action during that time. We're still going to have 3.5 hour games.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with
pitchers. We're going to be going through pitchers pretty quickly too, right?
It would be pretty amazing to see. And honestly, I think there's only one manager out there right now that would test this, and that would be, and he's not managing right now. Not to my, I don't believe I heard his name as a manager, but there's one manager out there that would test the waters and put the shift on for a certain batter. That manager, Joe Madden.
Joe Madden, absolutely.
Without a doubt. One more point to point up on, and I'm just going to touch on this really quick because you mentioned you're going to run out of pitchers pretty quick. And that's a big concern based on what we just got here recently. Yep. And that is the mathematical calculus equation for position players pitching. And to be honest with you, I had my notes in front of me, and I don't know what I did with it, but there's these triggers where you can implement position players pitching. It's up 10, down 8, got to be in the 9th inning, can only be in extra innings. There's certain stipulations on when
you needed a PhD in mathematics to figure out when you can bring in a fucking
It's the American pastime. And again, I'll go back to this, and I'm just going to touch on this rule really quickly. I'll go back to the same point I made in this shift. I'm going to put my players wherever the hell I want to. I'm going to put players in whatever position I want to. If I want Brett Phillips because I need to save my arms for an upcoming series with the division-leading New York Yankees and we need to take 3 from New York, then I'm going to put Brett Phillips in a throwaway game against the Detroit Tigers, okay?
Go out there and throw BP for 3 innings, bud.
The stipulations.
Well, and you don't get the matchups like you did with Rizzo and Freeman. Come on.
And those are special.
Those
are great highlights. You know what? If I'm watching a blowout baseball game, the only reason I'm watching a blowout baseball game is because Freddie Freeman's on the mound. That's insane. That's fun to watch. And now you've taken that away. And again, I don't know what these people that are making these rule changes are passing around smoking with each other because, well, all right, well, up 8 sounds good, but then if they're down 10 and it goes into the 9th inning, then we need stop it all. Stop it all. Stop it all. Get rid of Manfred. Stop it all. These rule changes are insane, and I no longer have a concept of what baseball is.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's do our salute to service before we jump into our preview of the AL East. So every episode we dedicate to a fallen service member. This segment of the show is brought to you by Folds of Honor. It's our Folds of Honor salute to service. This week's episode goes out to Sergeant First Class Elis Barreto Ortiz. He died September 5th, 2019, serving during Operation Freedom Sentinel. At the time of his death, Sergeant Ortiz was 35, hailed out of Morovis, Puerto Rico. He was part of 82nd Brigade Support Battalion, 3rd Brigade Combat Team, 82nd Airborne Division out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina. An IED went off near his vehicle in Kabul, Afghanistan. Sergeant First Class Ortiz, we have the watch. Raul said it a couple of episodes ago on the Blitz, like Army, the naming conventions for their brigades and divisions, and oh my goodness, it's so long. You got to like take a deep breath just to get out where he was attached to. All right, let's shift gears. Let's talk a little AL East preview. We're going to start from the bottom up. And last year's cellar dwellers in the AL East, the Boston Red Sox. This offseason had a little bit of an eventful offseason. So Rafi Devers secured the bag, got his extension near the end of last year. They bring in Justin Turner, but they lose Xander Bogaerts. I'm really curious to hear thoughts on where the Red Sox are and whether or not – I mean, they lost JD Martinez too. They lost quite a bit in free agency. Xander was kind of the big name that departed. But, Ty, what do you think of the Red Sox? Did they get better by any chance? Are they worse? Are they going to finish last again?
No, they won't finish last. But they won't make the playoffs. Listen, the baby-faced assassin Devers is a phenom offensively. I'm looking at that lineup right now in its current form, and I see the baby-faced assassin as the one-man wrecking crew in that offensive lineup. I don't know where the run production is going to come from Boston. However, I don't think Boston finishes last, and I'll say it because I do think ultimately that they do have a good starting rotation built in. The one bugaboo for the Boston Red Sox last year was it was the literal mash unit of Major League Baseball. That was the most banged up rotation, bullpen. They were throwing arms just seemingly at random to toss a guy out there because everybody was on the DL. They were constantly calling up people from Pawtucket and their other minor league organizations just to get through a 9-inning baseball game with a little health, with a little bit more with a little less injury. I think this rotation is good enough to keep this lineup, which, let's be honest, it's not world class. It's not postseason bound in my mind. They're good baseball players, but they don't have the pop to stick with the American League East. And as we start to roll through the rest of the AL East, offensively, Boston's fifth. Their pitching staff could bring them a long way up, however, compared to where they finished a year ago. I think this is a better finish for Boston, but I still don't think it's a postseason finish for Boston. But I think as far as the Red Sox faithful at Fenway, they're going to have a little bit better baseball to watch this season.
Stove, you agree? Disagree?
No, I disagree. Disagree. I think they're going to finish. Hey, it makes it fun. What gets teams in trouble?
Steroids.
Beer drinking in the clubhouse, I guess.
Beer and chicken.
Pitching. Okay. You got the Red Sox pitching staff is like the Mets, except not as good. You have 4 guys over the age of 30. Okay. You have Chris Sale, who has thrown fewer than 50 innings since he first started using Zoom. Okay.
Yeah.
You also have Corey Kluber. He hasn't thrown a full season since 2018. Okay. Pivetta, he makes starts. Not very good.
He makes starts.
He
He takes the ball.
Yeah. And then James Paxton's been hurt so many times, it's legitimately impressive that his arm is still attached to his freaking body. So I honestly don't see the Red Sox moving up from the 5th spot in the AL East with that pitching staff. I really don't, unless by some miraculous, a chicken was sacrificed here, at the start of the season by every single member of the pitching staff. They don't get better. They don't. They need to trade for some arms and get some young blood in there, and utilize, use those guys for some learning experience. Use them for expertise and everything else like that. But you're not gonna have a healthy pitching rotation at all with the Red Sox. Not one bit.
Yeah, I'm in line with Stove on this one, and I'm going to go as far as to say I think that this is a 65 to 70 win roster, and I worry about the health of the pitching. And if you're right and they do stay healthy, I think they have a chance to win 75 games and maybe finish 4th, depending on who comes back to them in the AL East. I just don't. This is not a playoff team. I agree completely. I worry that
win team.
I think 65 to 70 wins is what I have for the Red Sox.
Yeah. I'm going about 67 and a half.
Perfect.
If I'm going Pacoda standings plus Tyson adjusted, because I like to make my own little observations and tweaks.
You gotta have your own metric.
I'm right with you guys. I'm at 75.
Okay.
I'm at 75 off the postseason radar, but like I said, better baseball than what those fans were treated to a year ago.
And even 75 doesn't even get them to 4th place.
We'll talk about it.
All right, we can talk about it. So let's move up a little bit. And we had the upstart Baltimore Orioles last year, finished with 83. Let me double check. 83 wins, above 500 for the first time since the Second Great War. And young, upstart, didn't have a lot of pitching, but they were working magic in the second half of the season and even threatened to potentially get into the playoffs until an unfortunate series down the stretch really kind of put them out of the running. So let's talk about the Orioles. So only real acquisition of the offseason, Kyle Gibson. Does that register on your radar? Maybe, maybe not. Adley Rutschman, another year, right? He's got a full season basically under his belt, most of a full season under his belt. What growth do we see from him this coming season? And not to mention the other young guys. Ryan Mountcastle's a big one that comes to mind. He was actually in kind of the dark horse talk preseason last year for MVP if he had made good on what he did during his rookie year. Stove, I'm going to start with you, man. Orioles, better, worse, about the same?
They finished third.
Fourth in the division.
Fourth in division.
But three teams got in the playoffs.
Okay, so
and they were 4 games over 500.
They're better than they were last year. And if and you brought up the main man, Rutschman. Okay, if you look at when they called him up, the Orioles were 15-24.
Yeah.
Okay, when he came up, 56-37. I mean, the guy's legit. Okay. Added a spark that the Orioles needed. Yes, they ran out of gas towards the end. Again, this one's going to be hinged on pitching as well. They don't have great pitching, but they don't have terrible pitching though either. And so it will be interesting to see how the Orioles pitching staff holds up and where they're sitting at the trade deadline too. Because if they're sitting pretty decent at the trade deadline between second and third, or maybe even fourth to third in the hunt right there, if they're going to go out and spend money on some pitchers because they didn't in the offseason.
Ty, you agree?
Nope.
Shocker.
Sure
So
don't.
this is your last place team.
This is my dead last place team, and I say dead last,
Whoa!
meaning dead last. Maybe a step in the wild card standings in front of piss poor Oakland. This is a dramatic, in my book and in my person.
What is this guy doing? Sorry, Ty.
Opinion. This is where the Baltimore front office and the fan base is going to take a big learning experience and a big old slice of humble pie for what they did not do when the grease was hot, so to speak. They could have started cooking in winter meetings, and they didn't. And I truly believe that they will suffer because of it. Don't get me wrong. Adley Rutschman is my boy. I have been a supporter for Adley Rutschman since he was catcher in the College World Series, and I was right behind home plate watching him play. Nothing better than watching that guy in person doing what he does. He is a phenom, and he is a world-class player for that organization. Adley Rutschman can't do it by himself. And one of the biggest things you mentioned was the pitching staff. And Gary brought it up right out of the gates. That pitching staff in the second half of the season, especially that bullpen, somebody sprinkled fairy dust on those arms because that was magical. Now, you go back to that late series that ultimately dropped them out of the American League race. Guess whose featured series that was, and guess who watched all 3 of those games, and guess who watched them take a tumble? That was my featured series. I saw Baltimore become human that day. I saw Baltimore kind of get, maybe even, dare I say, a little bit exposed that day. And from what I saw at the tail end of the 162-game season a year ago when Baltimore couldn't make the playoffs, I said, they are on the doorstep. They need to go get some arms. And there was name after name after name after name. There was pass after pass after pass. You're in the area. You know the name Zimbrowski, and it sounds a lot like old school Zimbrowski, which is more of a, we've got a good team. Let's just kind of feel it out a little bit and see if some of these guys can maybe take a step up of what their projections are. They're not going to do it. You got to go get a guy. I hope that I'm wrong because I love the Baltimore story. And I from a baseball fan perspective, do want to see them get into a little bit of a scrap in the American League East. And I kind of want to see them throw down with the heavy hitters in the American League. And I agree with Stove. If Baltimore is in the chase towards the deadline, they have to go. The green light's there. And here's my biggest fear for the Orioles organization is if they don't step on the gas pedal, the little window for these markets, and I'm not just going to talk market size, but for these type of clubs, your Baltimores, your Kansas Cities, even Cleveland to some respect, the window of opportunity is nimble thin, and you have to accelerate and blow through it. Kansas City did it. Baltimore needs to. I'm scared that they won't. And if it rings true, if history proves to repeat itself like it so often does in this sport, in Major League Baseball, I have Baltimore sub 65.
It's tough. So I'm a little bit in between, right? Both of you right now. I look at it and I say this is a young, exciting roster. And it's not just offensively. They've got 3 guys in the rotation that if they are the guys that they're counting on to step up and they step up, then maybe this is more of that second half team than it was the first half team, right? Maybe this is more of the post-Rutschman call-up team than it was the pre-Rutschman call-up team. I'm looking at Austin Both. I'm looking at Dylan Kramer, and I'm looking at John Means, right? Are you 3 going to be the linchpins of this rotation? Because Kyle Gibson's not going to be. He's a 5th guy who can eat up innings for you, might throw a gem once in a blue moon, will get you a quality start, right? 6 innings, a run or 2, and he'll keep you in a game. He's a guy that's going to eat innings. That's all he is. That's what you signed him for. Don't think he's going to be more than that. You're not going to figure it out if 3 other clubs haven't figured it out at this point with a guy like Kyle Gibson. So I'm looking at those 3 that if they step up, I'm going to be wrong, and they're going to win more games than I think they're going to win. If they're worse than I think they're going to be, then they're going to be in your territory, Ty. I just looked at this offseason and I said, one guy, Verlander. DeGrom, maybe, if you think you could keep him healthy. Rodon, right? There were names out there of guys you could throw in at that number 1 spot and say on any given day when we're facing the other team's best, our guy gives us the best chance to win.
Yep.
And that's what you need, because then that has the trickle-down effect for your rotation where guys like Means and Both and Kramer aren't facing those 1, 2, 3 guys. They're facing 2, 3, 4, and you can rely on your offense to pick it up when those guys struggle because they are still young. I know Means is kind of an older guy, but he's young in terms of his major league experience. I just think that they really, like you called it, Ty, they whiffed. They missed an opportunity this offseason. They could have picked up one of those guys and really changed the trajectory of this team and seized that momentum they had in that second half of last year. I hope for their sake I'm wrong about where I have them, but I have them between 73 and 81 wins. I've got them flirting with 500, but not over 500. And I've got them finishing 4th again this year. I've got them finishing above the Red Sox, but I'm right there where they're going to be within striking distance of 500 at the end of the season. And I think they're going to look back at this season and say, fuck, we missed an opportunity. Because they're going to win a lot of games with that offense and a lot of games with that youth that if they'd have had that one linchpin in their rotation, they could have made a big, big difference. All right, let's move up the ladder. Tampa Bay finished 3rd last year. They stayed a little bit pat. They did have one pitching signing in the offseason, but I think we know what we know about the Tampa Bay Rays, right? They're going to lose a lot of guys to free agency. They're going to get a lot of compensatory and supplemental picks in the draft. They're going to put those guys in the farm system, and they're going to be studs in about 5 years, and then they're going to trade them away or they're going to let them leave in free agency, and we're going to see this cycle continue because they're the best at it in all of Major League Baseball. It is amazing, amazing how competitive they stay when you look at their free agent offseason, they lost like 4 guys, three from the rotation and 1 starter in the field. Kiermaier went. I forget where he ended up landing, but they lost him. So, Ty, what do you have here on the Rays? What are your thoughts?
Gosh, it's funny that you say we know exactly what we're going to get out of Tampa Bay, because we know exactly what we're going to get out of Tampa Bay. And if you look at my projection for the Tampa Bay Rays, I see it right where they finished last year, right smack dab at third, in the middle of the road. Yes, the Rays are once again a playoff team. Here's what I really like about what Tampa has done is, because of some of the things that you've mentioned, some of those free agents that are going to be leaving the system, some of the potential trade bait that is on this roster towards the trade deadline time. What Tampa did really well is they just loaded up the dugout with some talent. They're deep. They might be, in my opinion, the deepest team in the American League East that can call guys up, that can give guys rest. I think they're going to stay extremely healthy. I think they learned their lesson with Wander Franco a year ago, because they didn't have a really good backup plan to fall back on when Wander Franco went on the 60-day disabled list. They went out and they just loaded up on everyday utility guys that can go out and play multiple positions, except for pitching, of course, because you're not up 10 or down 8. They're deep, and you're right. Of all the teams in Major League Baseball, Tampa presses a lot of right buttons. They're, again, they don't slam the foot on the accelerator and make that go like a lot of other teams do, but they're just cruising. They're cruising, and they're making good pace, and they're going to make good pace again this year. I got them finishing right around that high 80 to low 90 mark, right back in that third spot, right back into the American League playoffs, and potentially an early exit. We'll see. Does Wander Franco explode? Do we see a better production out of Jose Siri this year? Does he start to come into his own a little bit? Does Randy Arozarena have a little bit more healthier year? I think they're getting him out of the leadoff spot. If I've done my research correctly, he was in the leadoff spot for a little bit last year. He was struggling in that leadoff spot. And I think they're going to try to take him down, use some of that power, maybe towards the middle of the order. I love a guy like Isaac Paredes. I think he is just a phenomenal athlete on that offense. And their pitching staff, with McClanahan and Glasnow going 1-2, that's a hell of a 1-2 punch. They're not deep towards the bottom half of that rotation, but they just loaded up the dugout with a lot of guys. The bullpen's deep. And by the by, the farm system is pretty darn good too. I think they rank in the top 10 in Major League Baseball in terms of the top 300 prospects that are in the system. So they're going to be good for a while. Tampa continues to play all their cards right. Front office wise, they get an A+ every year from me based on what they do. They're boring as hell because they play at the Trop, and that is the epitome of a dumpster fire for a Major League Baseball stadium, all part from the Oco Coliseum down in Oakland. Those are the 1A and 1B in my humble opinion. They're boring as hell. I actually don't like watching Rays home games because of it, because it just makes me sick to my stomach that you're in the state of Florida and you can't have an open air stadium. But Rays finished right where they were. That they are. What was it?
They are who we thought they were.
They are who we thought they were. They're the Rays.
Go ahead and crown them third place.
Mid-pack for the Rays.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned the whole, the rotation is the one thing they don't have a ton of depth. And I wouldn't be surprised if, May, June, July, they're just rotating guys out of AAA who come up and just throw 105 miles an hour for fucking 3 games and then go back down, right? Because that's what the Rays fucking do. So what are your thoughts on the Rays, bud?
Ty hit it with Franco there. See it, with him being on the 60-day disabled list last year. Does he step up, play more of a role, more of a big-time player, as all these expectations have been put on him, and somewhat unfairly, but that's what we do in sports. We put those big expectations on players that have shown potential, that have shown promise. He's the next best thing since sliced bread and what's his name? Longoria, Yeah. But you have to give him time. He's only 21. Okay. But then the other thing too is pitching as well. Pandemic era. Glasnow. We thought he was the next big stud for him, and he pitched 7 innings last year. 7. Their pitching staff. You mentioned it wasn't deep. It is. It's decent. It's decent. Not great, but not terrible though either. It's decent. But if they have Glasnow, if they have a healthy Glasnow, if he can be a number 2 starter for him, and you're playing a short series, watch out. Like that rotation then in a short series can be very dominant. So that's where I am with them. I'm honestly, I mean, you can't go wrong with their, Ty mentioned their farm system. If someone gets hurt, they'll just bring someone up from their farm system, and it seems like they produce. No matter who they bring up, they always produce. I'm third here. I'm third with them.
So I'm the outlier on these guys. I've got them finished in second. I'm not going to spoil who I've got dropping out of the top 2, but I've got the Rays finishing second. I've got them about where Ty said with wins. Stove, I don't know if you mentioned a win number you were projecting, but high 80s, right? Maybe 90 games, 87 to 90.
I'm going to say, between 80 and probably 85.
Okay.
Wins for them.
Yeah, so I've got them a little higher than that. I'm with Ty on the number of wins, but I've got them finishing second. They're just like we've said, right? We know what we're going to get from them. They're going to be consistent. They're going to churn out young guys that are just going to fill crucial roles and produce, because that's what they do. And I think we see Wander Franco get back to the trajectory he had as a rookie. He got a little nicked up last year, and that can really take a toll on you. Plus, I also think with him, there was a lot of preseason hype about MVP, and I think that it's possible for a young guy, especially, that he let a little bit of that kind of creep in, and he was pressing at times. Mm-hmm. So I think we're going to see him get back to what we saw from him as a rookie, and I think we're going to see him really take that next step forward and become more of what we know he can be with the level of talent that he has and how good he is with the bat. I do think we're going to see that. So I'm 87 to 90 wins probably for the Tampa Bay Rays. All right, last year's runner-up, Toronto Blue Jays, made a little bit of a move. They signed Chris Bassett this offseason away from the Mets. And I think we can all agree they were a little bit of, even though they finished second, made the playoffs, I think they were a little bit of underachievers for big stretches of last year. There were times when it didn't look like they were even going to get into the playoffs, but they got hot late, made that run, ended up actually surpassing Tampa and getting a higher wild card than them, finished second in their division. Stove, I'm going to start with you because you picked them to win the World Series last year.
I did. Yeah, I absolutely.
So do you think they're going to get closer back to that, or what are we going to see from them this year?
I do. I think they were the favorites they were one of the favorites to win the World Series last year. Okay. Mm-hmm. They had that success the year prior. They got knocked down a notch this past year. I think it was a good learning experience for those guys. Okay. Especially for Vlad Jr. Okay. He underperformed last year, big time. And you hit it on the head. They underachieved last year. They got off to a very slow start. And before you knew it, 3 weeks into the season, the Yankees already have a 10-game lead, in the AL East. Okay. But you look at what they did. You said they added Bassett. You had Springer. You had Gurriel Jr. and you had Hernandez in the outfield last year, who hit a ton of balls over the outfield. That was many balls that they dropped, though, in between all three of them. So they got rid of Hernandez. They got rid of Gurriel. They moved Springer over to right field. They brought in some good defensive outfield and one that can hit as well. And so I think couple their defensive outfield with what they have offensively, I think that, yeah, I'm picking them to be my division winners here. And I'm going to put them at 98 wins the division with the Blue Jays. I'm not going to pick my World Series winners or anything else right
We'll do that later.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Okay, we're not doing that. Okay, we're not going to be a little premature like we were last year.
We'll set up the kitchen for those picks.
Yeah, but the only question that I have is that offensive performance, the power that they had with the outfield last year. They got rid of a couple of those guys. Does the defensive performance outperform that offense that they lost?
Good points. I'm not going to piggyback yet because I'm going to let Ty go first.
1 hour, 2 minutes, and 45 seconds into the podcast. And other than the rule changes, it's the first time that me and Big Stove agree.
Hey-o.
As we are taking Canada, our home and native land, to the very top of the American League East. Actually not from Canada, but I'll watch a lot of hockey. So Toronto's going to go to the top. And Toronto, I'm going to give you one more than Stove. I'm going to say 99 because Canada and hockey and Wayne Gretzky might as well go the big 99, right? 99 wins for Toronto, really honestly right in line with Big Stove. Here's where I think they make big jumps, just big jumps. Santiago Espinal is he was a flash in the pan a couple different times. Well, he's now sitting in the dugout. He's going to be able to come in just like what Tampa's doing, loading their dugout with extremely talented players. You bring in a guy like two-hit Whit Merrifield from the Kansas City Royals, swings over to the Yankees, flips over to the Toronto Blue Jays. Two-hit Whit there in Toronto is your starting second baseman. When Whit needs a little day off, although he's never really ever taken one because the man's an Iron Man, basically this generation's version of Cal Ripken Jr., in my personal opinion, Whit provides you a spark. I love Dalton Varsho, formerly of Arizona. He's got some pop in the stick. He is a good defensive player out in the outfield, a guy that can really patrol out there. He's going to command. And then you mentioned Kevin Kiermaier is now in Toronto. That was a huge addition. The Chris Bassett move, going from third in the rotation to the New York Mets to fourth in the rotation potentially for Toronto. They're four deep. And their pitching is going to get him a long way. You still have Gavin Biggio that's sitting in the dugout right now. He's not on the starting lineup. So they're deep. They've got guys. And then bring in a guy like Brandon Belt. And I'm not a Brandon Belt advocate for when he was playing first or when he was in the outfield. He's kind of a defensive liability. But it's the designated hitter position. The guy's got a pop in the stick. They've got interchangeable pieces that they can move around. What was the biggest problem with Toronto last year? In my opinion, the biggest problem was Toronto was streaky, and they had guys that would go on god-awful long hitless streaks. And Biggio and Bichette, both on my fantasy teams, I know that firsthand. They had long hitless streaks. So what do you do when you got a guy in a funk? You give them a couple of days rest. You bring in another guy, and they've got guys that are going to be able to fill that void. Toronto makes a gigantic jump this year, and I think they do finally hit where their expectations were at a year ago. Might have been just a year late. It's like the story of my entire life. I know something's good, and I go after it, and then it's like I have to sit there and be patient with it and wait a year, and I'm the least patient person, so I throw it out, and then it's a gold mine for somebody else. Toronto's going to be a gold mine this year in the American League East, and they're my top dog.
Yeah.
Or bird.
For sure. We're all in lockstep here. So
hey!
Yeah, and we're all really close, right? I had 97 to 101 wins for them is where I've got them. So I'm right, 98, 99, right? That perfect number. I like the move to get Bassett. They lost Stripling, but I think Bassett's an upgrade on Stripling. And Ty, you mentioned it. Stove, you mentioned it. It's the depth, the length of the lineup. We talked about it last year when they added Matt Chapman. It made that lineup super long. However, We had guys last year and they underachieved big time. Vlad Guerrero was down. Kevin Biggio was down. Bo Bichette was down. Matt Chapman had a huge funk to start the season. Got really hot midsummer, then kind of cooled off late in the season. The pitching was never consistent enough. I think the depth of this team, the guys that they've brought in, and Ty, you mentioned by name, but Stove, you mentioned the additions in the outfield. Kevin Kiermaier, in my opinion, was one of the 5 best in terms of need and fit free agency acquisitions this offseason. And that's regardless of all the pitchers that changed positions. I think Kevin Kiermaier was such a big get for Toronto because of what Stove mentioned with the fielding problems they had last year. I can't tell you how many times I watched a highlight and just couldn't believe what I was watching from the Blue Jays, or games that I tuned into. They seemed lost in the outfield. I think Springer's more natural in right field. Kevin Kiermaier is one of the best defensive center fielders in all of baseball, and he has been for a long time. Also brings some pop to that lineup. And I think it takes a lot of pressure off those offensive players that they don't have to be crazy trying to score 100 runs a game. I think they can just get back to what they're best at. Just mash the ball and have fun playing the game. So yeah, 97 to 101 wins. This is my number one. This is my top dog in the AL East as well. So let's finish up. Yankees finished first place last year. They go get Rodon this offseason. Judge set the AL home run record last year and got a huge payday this offseason. Ty, let's start your way. Yankees, what do you see from them this year?
I mean, just a little bit of a step back, right? I'm not thinking, and now that we've kind of put the full circle and all the pieces have been revealed, I realize kind of where you're going to go with the New York Yankees. Maybe a little bit more of a step back in terms of where I have them. I've got them right about 94. And one of the reasons being on the offensive side of the ball. Okay. They've got those pull hitters, and they've got those guys, they've got the guys that couldn't beat the shift last year. The Yankees ran into some problems offensively because they had guys that simply just couldn't hit around a shift. And now with things being opened up a little bit more defensively, I think that gives guys, like Donaldson, much more of a chance to be successful. Certainly guys like Giancarlo Stanton. I think, if Stanton stops, which I don't know if he can. I don't know if it's in his brain to stop going for the exit velocity and the launch angle and the Stantonian blast, as the New York Yankees announcer likes to say, right? If he just swing the bat like a normal baseball player, I think Stanton would have an extremely high batting average, but he continues to go for the long bomb and the long ball. He's going to have to rein it in a bit. And if Stanton can do that and they can play productive baseball and they can get guys moving around the base paths, I think the offense is going to be good enough. Certainly from the pitching standpoint, you add in Carlos Rodon, and he'll add a little flavor to that starting rotation. My biggest question on the Yankees, and it's where I have them taking that step back in Toronto, going right on by. My biggest question is, can they close out games? Can they win games in the 7th to 9th innings, 1-run games where you need that bullpen to come up and shut the opponent down? I don't know that they can do it. I think the Yankees are going to lose a couple games this year, a couple key, crucial games this year down the stretch, because teams were able to just hang around with New York. They were able to go blow for blow with that offense. They were able to counterpunch. And if a team is going to go up against New York late and it's close, the majority of the time I'm taking the odds on whoever the Yankees are playing, because I like that opportunity to win those games in the latter stages just based on that bullpen. So, again, it's not a huge step back in my book. I'll be curious to hear the both of your comments, but just a slight step back. The Yankees are still going to be a solid baseball team. They'll be in a dogfight probably with the Rays for that second and third spot, but a slight step back, right around 94, 93 wins, and certainly a trip back to the playoffs.
Stove?
Yeah, I got them finishing second with about 92 wins. And to me, and Ty kind of hit it here on the head for me, is the bullpen help towards the later part of the innings. I think if you look at the overall pitching staffs of the entire major league, this is probably one of the best pitching staffs out there. With the addition of Rodon, you have Garrett Cole, Severino, Cortez. And so to me, past couple of years, you thought of the Yankees as those Bronx Bombers scoring, 1,000 runs, whatnot. And that's what they were doing early on last year. They were beating teams by scoring, 7, 8, 9 runs. But towards the latter part, and more so after the All-Star break, that wasn't the case. They weren't scoring those runs, but their pitching staff kept them in those ball games. To me, the Yankees are more of a run prevention team right now. And if Judge stays healthy, which you guys alluded to in our group chat earlier today, by him playing, getting some reps over there at first base and everything else. If Judge can stay healthy, that's a big part of their offense right there. And that's why the Yankees signed him to the deal that he got this offseason. But I'm in agreement with Ty as far as second place, 92 wins, and that back part of the ball game with the pitching staff. I agree with him that they are going to lose the Yankees some ball games down the road.
So obviously, as things have kind of fallen into place, I've got the Yankees in third place, and I'm going to be frank. I almost slid them down to fourth, honestly. But as we got closer to this show, I got a little less bullish on the Orioles, and I slid them back just a little bit from where I had them. I had them with a few more wins early, but got closer, and the pitching, right? We talked about that. That was the thing that kind of said, okay, maybe I shouldn't be as bullish on the Orioles. I've got the Yankees finishing only a game or two better than them, too. I've got the Yankees right in that 75 to 82 area, battling for 500 at the end of the season. And for me, it's a couple of things. You guys mentioned the pitching. The pitching's a problem. To me, I think the bullpen is awful. It's not just bad, it's awful. I think the rotation, they were very fortunate last year with guys like Severino and Cortez having kind of magical parts of the season. And then we saw down the stretch that they kind of became the guys that we've seen from them in the past. Cortez wasn't good in the playoffs. He wasn't good down the stretch when they needed him to be. And how many games did we watch the Yankees win on a crazy walk-off at the end of the game last year, right? And in other sports, right, especially I'll equate it kind of to the NFL. When a team has a season where they get a lot of turnovers, which leads to success, it's the law of regression to the mean. And we see it almost without exception, teams regress back to the mean and they're not as good as they were. Well, for me with baseball, those walk-off hits, those one-run games, I personally treat that as part of that kind of regression to the mean. And I don't think the Yankees are going to go on a 12-game win streak where they win by a combined total of 18 runs like they did at one point last year. So those are the games I think we're going to see them lose, because you guys mentioned the bullpen. It's worse this year than it was last year, and it was really bad last year. They're not going to be able to stay in those games late. They're going to have to mash. And there was a long stretch of last year where they won a lot of games 3-2, 4-3, 2-1 with Aaron Judge hitting a walk-off home run. I also don't think teams are going to pitch to Aaron Judge like they did last year. I think it was a lot of the media exposure. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of this kind of hubbub that there was something going on, that teams wanted to maybe seize some of the moment. I don't think pitchers are going to pitch to him as much. I don't think Stanton can stay healthy. I don't think Donaldson can stay healthy anymore. I don't think Judge is going to stay healthy, because he's had one healthy season, and it was last year. And I know he hit 54 bombs in a year, but he also missed some time that year as well. So I just look at this team, and I think last year it was a lot of unicorn farts and Band-Aids that allowed them to win as many games as they did. And they disappeared so quickly on the AL East because of all that, those things combined, that they kind of held on late. And we saw it in the postseason. They kind of got beat up in the postseason by an inferior club because of the fact that they just didn't fit the bill for me last year, and they didn't get better this offseason, in my opinion. I know Rodon's a nice get for them, and I know that the 1-2 punch with Rodon and Cole, I think that's a fine 1-2 punch. I don't believe in the rest of the guys as much as it sounds like you guys do with Cortez and Severino. I'm a little less on them. I'm a little more skittish about them this season. So I think the Yankees are going to take a pretty big step back, and I think it's going to be panic time there, and I think it's going to be the moment that they're going to start cleaning house and figure out how they can fix the rotation and the bullpen. The bullpen has always been something the Yankees had a ton of, but suddenly, like the last couple of years, they just don't. So, All right. Well, that finishes up the AL East for us. We were all in agreement that the Rays would finish at the top. The rest is kind of, oddly enough, we all agreed that the Rays would finish third, but the rest is kind of up and down. Ty, closing thoughts.
Kind of sounds like the entire American League East division, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it is a slobber knocker. This is still the fun one in all of the American League, and certainly this. I think when we come up next week and we talk a little bit about the Central, it's going to be a little bit tighter, and there's a few outliers there that might make the Central a little bit interesting. But as far as your entry of quality baseball teams, potential teams to make a playoff push, the American League East is where it's at, and it's a bloodbath, and it's going to be extremely fun to watch. One final thought that I will pass along when you talk about the New York Yankees and their offense and whether or not they'll be able to produce and whether there was a little fairy dust and rainbow sherbet that was sprinkled on things. You got to go back to the prospects. Last year was Adley Rutschman, along with Julio Rodriguez, some of the young guys that came up and made a big name. And I'll give you, and I will butcher his name. It's either Volpe or Volpe. I'm not quite sure which one. Volpe kind of sounds better, and I'm going to go with it. Anthony Volpe, number 5 prospect, a shortstop. I am very, very curious. He's on my watch list because I think as I watch his film a little bit in terms of what he's been able to do, I like it a lot. And on the eye test, I'd move him from that 5 spot to that 1 spot. And if he wins that job at shortstop, based on the rule changes that they got put together in the collective bargaining agreement, the good part that you don't have to keep minor leaguers down anymore in the day of social media. And of course, the New York media is going to be screaming at the top of their lungs to see this guy on the field. If he can make a spark and make an impact, the Blue Jays just might not be safe, but that's the fun, and that's why we play the game. Volpe is on my prospect watch, and that's my final thought.
Stove, take us home, bud.
Does Aaron Judge repeat what he did last year? Does he stay healthy? Do the Blue Jays regain the luster that they had 2 years ago, or do they falter like they did last year? Does Adley carry the burden of the Orioles on his big back and lead them to the promised land of the playoffs for the first time in many, many years since the great Albert Bell?
There's a throwback.
Woo! Do the Rays and Glasnow come out victorious on top? Do the Red Sox? Do they surprise us all? Or do they falter to last spot? Who knows? That's why we play the game of baseball, like Ty said.
That's